David Rothenberg with me here in the studio. Thanks so much. We're gonna find out what we were listening to in just a minute, but not before I blow your horn just a little bit. This guy is capable of some mean jazz with whales. Yes, with whales. The results are astounding. The New York Times. One of the top 10 best science books of the year from Booklist. And someone I have respected my entire musical career, from Peter Gabriel. It's great to see and listen to David Rothenberg's work, harnessing science and music to point out the path of potential dialogue with the natural world and all the wonderful creatures within it. How exciting.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, such appreciation. So there's so much to talk about, and the beauty of Myrtle Tree Arts is that we've been able to have you as an artist in residency for the last few days, so you and I have talked nonstop as we explored El Dorado County. It's your first time here, is that?
Absolutely.
What do you think?
It's totally unexpected.
Say more.
You know, it's just a whole area of, it seems like everyone I hear is a musician in this town. And definitely everybody knows Paul. Paul is like, you know, he knows every single person in town. Yeah. And everyone has time to talk to him, you know, which is unusual. Because,
Yeah, it's we spoke about this about the time factor. That David, you live in the Hudson Valley, and I understand in your small town there's also a good number of musicians, but time is a factor.
it has some similarities to here, but it also has that East Coast New York vibe where you run into someone, they say, "How are you doing?" They say, "Oh, busy." And my instinct is to say, "Oh, I'm so sorry." But actually, I never feel busy. Maybe if I'm doing a lot of stuff, but I don't feel busy. I feel like just do these things.
So there's a lot going on, but people are often a bit involved with their own work, so getting them to attend.
It's very hard to get people to go to events because they all have their own events.
Yeah.
Like everyone's performing all the time, so how could they possibly go to your event? You're not going to go to theirs. And it's there's so much creativity everywhere. People are making so much music and art and putting on so many cool things.
Nice. Let's talk about what we just heard. What did we just hear? I recognized the clarinet. What was the rest of that?
All the sounds you heard came from the song of the thrush nightingale, which is a nightingale that lives in Eastern Europe. And it's one of the earliest pieces I made out of nightingale song, long before I started playing live with them. I had recordings of them and I played with them. And so that's one of these pieces that dates from the time I made my first bird-related album and book called Why Birds Sing. So that's like 2005 or so.
That's right. So we first met in, tell them how we met.
We first met, I'm thinking like in the 90s. Paul and Amy are among the very few people I've met like in airports and on airplanes. And they were, I saw they were sitting and totally involved, talking to each other the way they still do to this day. But they're holding this book by David Toop, the sound artist and writer on music, called Ocean of Sound. And I think I had only heard of this book and never seen it. And I surmised they were probably going to the same place I was going in Amsterdam, a conference called Doors of Perception.
And indeed we were. And the really shocking part, because you came right up to me in the airport and you said, we were in Dulles on a layover, and he said, "You're reading Oceans of Sound by David Toop." And you probably said, "I know him," because you know
I didn't know him at the time.
Oh, okay.
I met him later,
Okay.
I think.
Yeah. You hadn't met everyone at that point. But, while everyone in Placerville knows me, you know just about everyone. We began trying to go to Europe in 2016 with Miguel Noya, who was our partner in Dogon. And the first thing I had to do was call David Rothenberg, because I knew he would know everyone in Europe, and any country we could select, he would know someone that we should connect with there, and that's really true. So
you picked the one country I do know about. I think you're overselling
which
my
is
knowledge.
Estonia. That's
which
true.
is very limited and scattered. But since my wife is from Estonia and I'm going there every summer, I do know a lot of musicians there. And I suggested the person who would be right for you.
Well, that's true. But you also told us about an ambient music festival in Estonia, right? Which is, of course, everyone knows there's ambient music festivals in Estonia, right? So he pointed us to Kukimuru, which was in a farm, in a barn, and you basically had from children to grandparents in this village all sitting there listening to bloops and bleeps from all over the world, and we were invited to perform there, and he introduced us to Robert Jurjendal, the foremost Estonian guitar stylist, I would say. But I am just so delighted for you to say that Amira and I were the only interesting people you've met in the airport, when really you fly all over the world all the time doing workshops and concerts and lectures.
But you hardly ever meet interesting people in airports. They're there. I'm not saying they're not there. I'm saying I just don't meet them.
It's really funny. So let's talk about the Nightingales, since you brought it up. I might have even lost touch with you, or lost... I wasn't paying attention, and then all of a sudden I was, because I heard you were in Berlin in the spring, I think every year. So tell us about that project.
Yeah, I think, back in like 2005 when I made that piece you heard, I just took bird sounds from all over the world and would play around with recordings of them and cut and paste them together. But over time I began to realize it was much more interesting to play live with birds and with whales and with bugs, And over time, I thought it was especially interesting to do this where there were people around, not in the deep wilderness that was hard to go to, but you could be in a city and the birds were singing in the middle of the night. And I'd heard from various people that, oh, there's nightingales all over Berlin. You can go out and hear them. You're out coming back from clubs at 3 a.m. The nightingales are singing. It's dark. I said, oh, this is interesting. And so I made a plan to live there for a year and figure this out. And then it's true. Springtime came in April. It was about 11 years ago. It was 10 years ago. 2014, April. And that's when I first went out across the street from where I was living in the Hasenheide Park. And there the nightingales were singing, starting around midnight. Nobody else is singing then except people. And that turned out to be really interesting experience to play along with these famous birds, very famous birds I had read about, like most of us in English class in high school. Romeo and Juliet, is that the nightingale or the lark? John Keats is writing poems about nightingales, but you don't know what they sound like from reading all this stuff. I imagine they were very melodic, very mellifluous, but actually they sound more like DJs scratching records. All these noises, like what? That's what Shakespeare was writing about? That's what they thought was really cool music? Like, they were just totally into weird sounds hundreds of years ago, because nightingales have been praised for centuries. So that's where I got interested in the musicality of this sound. And then Berlin is full of cool musicians, so I found people and said, do you want to come out and play with nightingales? And surprising to me, nobody seemed to have done that. It seemed like the obvious thing to do there. There's so many birds singing in the middle of the night. Nobody had done it. And then we built this whole project, and I started to come back every spring. And then it was so fun watching what happened to people who did this for the first time. I said, we have to film this. We have to film people singing with nightingales for the first time. And so
now,
then
did you go out by yourself first?
Yeah.
With your clarinet? Mm-hmm. And so what was the first, what was the first interaction, should we say, when you really felt like there was a little back and forth going on?
The first, nightingales are the way they sing, their whole musical culture is made for this, because they sing one phrase, then they wait for a response. They go, boop, 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 and then they wait. They leave space for other nightingales to establish their territories who are in the same area. And they're very territorial, so much so that when they migrate to Africa in the winter, they come back next year to the same tree. So I know where the good birds are. I know where they are. You're going to find them every year, like, okay, you're back.
This is like your cat story about Istanbul.
The cats, they don't migrate. We don't have migration among cats. In Istanbul, every corner there's special cats, but people are obsessed with them, as opposed to Berlin. In Istanbul, everyone knows the cats. Like, when I was there with my friend Korhan, who I played music with nightingales with in Berlin, he said, oh, we have to go this way. Why? Oh, there's a cat that I like that's like, it's in this corner. And so we find the same cats. And so, but if the cats were migrating, that would be extraordinary. Like the cat would walk to Europe in the summer and come back. But I'm sure some cats do migrate somewhere in the world.
Maybe, okay. But the nightingale sings, and then you gradually reply. You reply with clarinet. What did they reply back?
Well, they're going to reply. They leave space for sound. The scientific view is they're mostly interested in nightingale sounds. But they're actually interested in all kinds of sounds, especially the ones that live in noisy places like Berlin. Like they kind of like it. They like the world of sound, and I think that what happens is it's not like you want them to copy you or I want to copy them. You want to make a music that no one species could make alone. Only you and the birds can make the thing that happens. And yes, you can do it in the studio and cut and paste anything together, but to do it live, that's just what's more interesting. That's like, then you're really entering, what kind of Wayne Shorter territory. The late, great jazz musician, he would say, like, you cannot rehearse for the unknown.
Yeah.
And so that's where we're going.
Yeah.
Here.
Now, you make music with birds, with insects, with cetaceans. And, when I heard you were doing work with whales, I was, of course, reminded by the great pioneer and jazz musician Paul Winter, and but you told me that there's a bit of a difference in your approach.
Well, I certainly got the idea to do it from Paul Winter because he lives in Connecticut, and that's where I grew up. And I read somewhere in a newspaper he was playing, and I was like a kid who liked to be alone in the woods a lot. And I really interested in nature, kind of environmental issues as a teenager, being an activist and protesting. And my father was an architect. He wanted me to be an architect. I said, there are too many buildings. We need fewer buildings. Let's take some down, you know. But he was very understanding. He said, architects take buildings down, you know, you can. And so, but I was very interested in how one might connect music and nature. I didn't know how. And then I heard this guy, Paul Winter, who lived not so far away, that this is what he did. And so I went to a concert of his. I met people who worked with him. And actually around the same time, me and his cellist were thrown out of the same music school. He was, you know, Eugene Friesen was teaching at the Westport Academy of Music, and I was a student. We were both kicked out for different things. Gene was teaching improvisation, which was bad, to impressionable young students, and I was just had a bad attitude, I think. Didn't respect the rules of this place enough, and so we were kicked out on the street, and then I got to meet him, and he said, we should play together. So that's
something. And so the Paul Winter work that we all know, the Living Music Foundation and his records, took beautiful recordings of whales, and then he wrote original compositions, right, to kind of highlight and but you've told me that from the inside that he, in a way, he sought out certain just segments of Humpback Song, or that were the most melodic, or is that so in a way?
Paul Winter has certainly been out in the wilds playing with animals, but he doesn't release much of that on his albums because he wants to make things count very melodic and sweet and harmonized. So he likes this one fragment from the famous nature recording Songs of the Humpback Whale, where the whale is going ooh, 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 ooh. So he can make it go da 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 da, and there's an organ in the background, and he's performing in cathedrals. It's very religious in a way. It's very, and you hear this and you say, the whale sings like church music.
Yeah,
it's something we get, and I kind of have a different view, which is like the whales sing crazy music, totally different than human music. And if we want to understand them, we have to change our music in the direction of the whale. We got to go that way. And instead of making them come our way, we have to go their way. And you end up with a different kind of music people aren't so used to. And, it might not immediately be so accessible.
And so, what did you do? How do you get out there? I think I mistakenly, I asked you, I said, oh, do you go on whale watches? And you said,
well, you can't go on an official whale watch for various reasons. Once there's a lot of people, they have a whole program. It's all scheduled. This happens, this happens, this happens, this happens. And one thing that doesn't happen is turning off the motor of the boat. So you're going to hear all this noise. And you also have to wait. When you're dealing with nature, you have to wait. You could have to wait hours. You might have to wait days for something to happen. And you go on a whale watch, it's a scheduled thing. People must be happy quickly, taken care of. And the patience it takes to get things out of nature, to spend time, interacting. Most people don't want to take this kind of time. Sometimes it happens right away. In fact, probably the best recording I ever made of a humpback whale was the first time I went out ever. And I did go out on a boat where people said, we want to go listen to whales and play music with them. There had just been a storm. It was probably January, February 2007. And the water was uncharacteristically brown and muddy. Close to the shore, there was a humpback whale was there singing without a lot of echoes underneath. So you really could hear one whale and then listen to the whale, learn from the whale, play along with the whale without having the usual sense of so many whales, so many boats, so much other sound. So sometimes you just have to be there for these moments.
So you're dropping a hydrophone?
Yeah, an underwater microphone. So then you're listening underwater. I'm not swimming underwater trying to play.
Right. So you drop a hydrophone, and then do you have a speaker on the boat, or
I have a speaker or headphones on the boat, depending how I'm doing it, whether
Okay.
a lot of people are there or not. And then I also have a speaker underwater, so what I play can be heard by whales.
Now that's interesting to me. So so now you're playing clarinet. Are you direct line or you're mic'd?
Yeah, it gets amplified, goes underwater. And so underwater, there's whale and clarinet. And you have to control the balance so you don't have too much feeding back and stuff like that.
And this is just basically you. You're the mixer.
No, I've
too,
done it.
or you have a
I've
mixer
done it with
you?
different people.
Yeah.
A year ago, just about exactly a year ago, I was there with a Dutch guitarist and a conductor of a Minnesota orchestra. She just really wanted to play her clarinet with whales, and we had an opera singer, and we had a lot of equipment, and we managed to get it to work quite effectively.
And how do you know the whales are listening?
I have no idea. I don't even know if when I'm playing with a human if they're listening. You know, and certainly,
That's it,
I think
that's
you're
it.
listening. You know, I think you're probably listening. But you know, sometimes you're playing music and you don't know if anyone's listening to anybody. They're just going. But what I do, I mean, I go out and wait and play these things with different animals, and then I try and then say, okay, after all these hours we did this. This part sounds really interesting to me. This is interesting. And then I present that, like, here, this is what we did. But we did it live.
Yeah.
And
Well, so
then-
that's not that different than doing an improvisation with other musicians, right?
That's right.
And you say, oh, this segment sounds pretty good, and you have no idea whether they were listening or whether they were listening to you or whatever
Right.
happened, right? We spoke about this just before, that only male. Oh, I wanted to start it this way. Alice Cooper once said, "Only women bleed." But
What about those chickens he's eating? Are
yeah,
they only
right.
female
I know.
chickens?
But only male
Yeah.
whales sing, and they seem to do it for the joy of making music. And since it's only males, there's some thought that they do it to attract the female, but the females don't show any interest. And it's, you said, just like human males who play the electric guitar, perhaps to attract women, and the women may not have any interest either. Say more.
Well, consider like, this is what you learn in biology class. Male animals are putting on displays like peacocks with these big tails. And then birds and, mockingbirds and California thrashers have really long songs that go on and on and on. And only the males are doing this. So therefore, it is to attract the attention of females. Okay, that's what you learn in class. But how come like a chickadee goes doo-doo, and then, a mockingbird has to sing for an hour with hundreds of different phrases? And you say, what are they doing? They're trying to attract a mate. It's an uninteresting answer. Doesn't say anything about what's happening. Same with people. Like, what is that guy Godwin doing? He's banging on the keyboard over there. He's singing. Oh, he's trying to attract a mate. Never mind. Okay. How about this heavy metal soloist just trying to attract a mate? It doesn't tell you anything about what they're doing. So biology is not interested in the music of animals because they're more interested in the function of what it's for. And so you miss out on the fact, something that Charles Darwin wrote about. Every animal has its own aesthetic sense. And that's why we've evolved beautiful feathers and beautiful songs, because animals have an aesthetic sense. 2 minutes of something, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to rephrase, why does one bird have a different type of song from another bird?
They've evolved a different kind of aesthetics. Like this species has evolved this need to do this kind of thing. And it didn't have to. In fact, it's impractical for peacocks to have these giant tails. It's impractical for a nightingale to sit on a tree all night where an owl could come by and just pick him off because they don't move when they're singing. So this is just something that evolved because there was a pressure in natural selection against survival of the fittest, but in favor of survival of the weird, the crazy, the cool. That's why I wrote a book called Survival of the Beautiful, an earlier book. And so this is what goes on. Biologists tend not to study this. It's unpopular. And then because we want to study someone we can use, be very pragmatic.
Okay, well, let's talk about something we can use, and we're going to go over a little bit. We're going to go over David's latest, The Secret Sounds of Ponds, and the accompanying CD. And your press and your company, Terra Nova, also sells hydrophones, which I purchased, and I began recording in the American River. And you are going to be offering a free workshop through Myrtle Tree Arts and American River Conservancy's RIPE area this Saturday at Wakamatsu Pond, where you're going to show us some of these tools. And anyone can sign up if you go to myrtletreearts.com/ripe-area. And you can try out these tools in the water. And hopefully maybe when you're going to come back and play some more music later in the show, maybe you'll play us something with these ineffable, undescribable sounds in the ponds. And it would really help the audience, I'm sure, to have heard it first for this question to make sense. But I'm going to ask it anyway. What is it we're hearing? When I started listening under the pond water, I thought, oh, this is little creatures. I'm hearing little creatures. They're singing to me. But you told me it's something different.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that plants made cool and interesting sounds for quite a while when I heard that David Dunn, who came from California, released this piece of music in the late 90s called Chaos and the Emergent Mind of the Pond, where you heard all these kind of cool sounds, and it was really musical. And he just left it at that. Look, some order has happened. We don't know who's in charge, but it's really beautiful. And like him, I also assumed these were insects, underwater insects. But when I started meeting the bioacoustic scientists who study this, they say, oh, most of the sounds you hear are plants in the middle of photosynthesis. We're hearing plants save the atmosphere by releasing oxygen into the air. And I thought, that's crazy. And then in between the rhythms of plants, you hear insects and occasionally fish making little interventions. So we'll play that for you a little later in the show.
Oh, good. Yeah.
And then we hope when you go to the pond, we're going to hear these things. But like anything in nature, you don't know what you're going to hear. Maybe you have to wait. Maybe you have to wait 10 minutes. Maybe you have to wait an hour. Maybe you have to wait 6 weeks. You don't know. But, you know, the natural world waits for no human and doesn't arrive on call. You know, it does what it wants when it wants.
Very good. Let's pause there.
Okay.
David's going to be back with some more music later in the program. And I think that when I look at the schedule today, we might have a few more minutes to talk with him because he's, as you can tell, versed in many a topic. But he also, as an East Coaster, has all these wonderful anecdotes about some of my heroes like Laurie Anderson and Lou Reed. So I'm going to prevail on him for a couple of anecdotes before we let him go today. Thanks for joining us on the program. David Rothenberg.
Thanks a lot.
Good. We're going to go to my favorite Placervillian. If I have to choose one, please welcome from the Bookery, Darren Coelho Spring. Hi. You've been called the David Rothenberg of Placerville. No.
Oh, yeah?
No, you've never been called that. So every month we have the Bookery on, and sometimes it's Heather. One time it was Nancy Dunk, and today we've got Darren back. And what do you got? What are you going to tell us about today?
So I have 3 Shades of Blue, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Bill Evans, and the Lost Empire of Cool by James Kaplan. Just came out a couple weeks ago, and I've read it already. It's really good. It's like sometimes I guess I have almost a theory of like the pleasure of reading books. Like supposedly people read for pleasure far less than they used to because they use their time doing other things, you know. But like to me, if people could only find that like one book in the universe that they most would want to be reading for pleasure at any given time.
Oh, that's Tinker Tailor Soldier's Spy.
Oh, yeah?
By Jean Le Carré.
Oh, nice. Then that, you know, that's what they should like be searching for, you know, the mystical quest for like the perfect book. And to always be having that perfect book, well, this was like the exact thing I wanted to be reading at the exact time. And yeah, it was very good.
It's so great, and I get to work in the Bookery once a week, and you know, there's bookstore music and there's bookstore music, right? And then we learned that, you know, Barnes and Noble and Borders, right? They kind of began that whole like, oh, we're going to release CDs, you know, that are like the best bookstore music, right? Like David was just talking to me about these days, the kids, the generation that's come up after, you know, YouTube and digital music and streaming, apparently music has to have a purpose. So there's massage music, and there's, you know, dating music, and there's cafe music, and there's, you know,
There's lo-fi vibes.
lo-fi
for
vibes, right?
whatever.
Lo-fi vibes for whatever, and Thai food music, and you know, but I have to say, since you started reading this book, you've started piping some Miles Davis and some Thelonious Monk and some, you know, into the bookstore. And the other day, I just turned to you and I just said, this is like the best bookstore music ever, right? Like real jazz, like old jazz.
Yeah.
It just works.
It might, yeah, almost is a little cheesy, but like, so the book, basically, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Bill Evans all play on the Miles Davis album, Kind of Blue. You've probably heard of it because it's maybe the most famous jazz album of all time, but it really is like the perfect bookstore music. It's an amazing album with 3 of the, you know, top jazz players from that era.
Yeah, I know. I haven't even, I never really even analyzed this, but I would say it's a combination of, there's space in that album.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of space. There's a lot of air.
And you might know more about the musical aspect, but I guess they're playing a lot of modal music. Less chord changes, less of a like real direction, and the music is more modal.
Yeah.
Like with that song, So What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And we're not going to go into describing what modal is,
Music
but
theory.
if you had a computer in your pocket, you could look it up, modal music. And but so give us a little bite of this. Do you want to?
Okay,
Can you just open it at random? Maybe just read a couple of sentences. I'd love to hear how it reads.
Okay, let's see.
Yeah, how does it read? I know
Okay.
you probably didn't earmark it.
I didn't really think about any quotes.
Yep.
It's kind of weird, like,
Just jump in.
Okay,
Jump in. Pretend
all
it's
right.
the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Go
okay,
ahead.
so, well, okay, let's see.
Yep, that's it. Whatever
Okay,
you
here we
turn
go.
to. All right, go ahead.
Okay, word quickly got out that something extraordinary was happening at the 5 spot. One weekend night that summer, long lines formed in the soft dusk. 8 weeks turned into 16, and then almost 6 months. The long stand became historic by every measure. Even while it was happening, if you loved jazz, you had to be there. And many, including fellow musicians, returned again and again. Bud Powell is said to have attended 4 nights in a row. J.J. Johnson went just once, but later said, "Since Charlie Parker, the most electrifying sound that I've heard in contemporary jazz was Coltrane playing with Monk at the 5 spot. I had never heard that kind of performance. It's not possible to put into words. I just heard something that I've never heard before, and I haven't heard since." The critic, Francois Pastif, who frequented the club during the period, predicted Coltrane's impact on current jazz musicians would be as great as that of Charlie Parker. So even though the book is mostly about these 3 musicians, it gives a biography of them, and then it kind of focuses on their time together and then their lives afterwards. It really is cool because it touches on the other important players like Charlie Parker, Thelonious Monk, and
Bill Evans.
Bill Evans. Well, he's one of the 3. But
yeah.
then also Ornette Coleman is really important because he really transformed jazz in the late 50s. But that section on
The 5 spot.
the 5 spot, yeah. So basically, you know, heroin addiction was a real problem for a lot of these musicians at the time. So John Coltrane had to overcome his addiction, and so Miles Davis fired him and then said, "If you ever straighten up, you can come back to my band." This was before the recording of Kind of Blue. But in the meantime, Coltrane, I think he might have still been using, but hooked up with Thelonious Monk for what was one of the most legendary bands of all time. And they would play these shows at the 5 spot. And yeah, I think they did some recording around that time, but I think, you know, they say that just nothing can really capture what was happening in that small club. So yeah.
Yeah. Great recommendation. So you've begun. You and Heather bought half of the Bookery a couple of years ago, and I think one of your innovations was that while it was known as one of the best used bookstores, I dare say, in the nation, for 40 years, with every topic under the sun and a constant shifting stock. Like many used bookstores, I don't know if any of you have had this experience, but you can go in and then you can go in the next month and it's the same stuff that you saw the month before. But the Bookery really has a lot of, and you've been managing the store, of course, for 15 years. So talk about that a little bit, about how the Bookery gets all this great stuff, but also your innovation in terms of bringing in some new material, and talk about a little bit about the genres and what you tried to bring in and what you brought in that's new.
Okay. Yeah, so we do have a reputation of always having new things coming in. It's because we buy a lot of books, we have a lot of customers, we're in a good location, and we just trust that if we spend the money that, we're going to turn the books over. But it also does take a lot of work to do that. I think a lot, there are probably a lot of bookstore owners who, kind of have their books and just kind of just sell the books, and it takes a while for them to go find more books to bring in, but we're buying books multiple days a week and we work really hard at that.
And you have some really interesting scouts.
Yeah, and we have some book scouts that find books. I got to go out book scouting myself last week, which I don't often get a chance to do. That's really fun. And the scouts all have their personality. Like I work there. Sometimes I'm cleaning books that come in, to get them ready for sale. And so sometimes I'll come kind of a box, and it will have, early Kurt Vonnegut Jr. and Alan Watts and Richard Brodigan and maybe. How about a certain poet? What would a poet be? But like beat writers,
a beat
probably.
writer like Rex Roth or
Yeah.
Ferlinghetti, and I'll just be like, oh, this is Doug Rice. Doug Rice has been here, or etc. So there's some great scouts.
Yeah. It's kind of nice because you can go to a book sale, like big, huge library sale. And some book scouts are very particular. They don't want to see you at the sale. They're annoyed to see you. They think you're going to get all the good books. They won't tell you where they go get their books. It's kind of like this unspoken thing. But to me, it doesn't really matter because everybody is finding their own little niche. And you can have multiple book scouts that are really good, and they gravitate towards different types of things. So I don't know. I just think of it as like a fun thing to do.
Yeah, it's fun if you love books. And so talk about the new books. Yeah.
Okay, so the new books it's really nice. For one thing, it's really nice supporting living authors and, helping get the word out there about these authors, and then also helping pay the bills a little bit. I know we don't turn over a lot of new books, but so that's a really nice aspect, because when you're selling new book or used books, it's a lot of the authors are dead. You're not putting any money in the pockets of the living authors because it's the secondhand market. So it just feels nice to do that.
And what about what categories? What are you showing off?
Yeah, I love music books. Probably over half the books I even read are music books. So we have a nice little section of music books. A lot of fantasy and science fiction books that are popular that we don't get in used a lot. Some classics that we sell out of a lot. We have a lot of kids books we have, and then we have a lot of nature books. I feel like that's just really important to get in, the top nature books of the last few years.
Right, like
So
David Rothenberg. I think we're going to have to
should.
stock.
We definitely.
We're going to have to stock some David Rothenberg,
sure.
and he will be there amidst Robert McFarlane and Ben Goldfarb and who's that other one that you mentioned, David? Of course, who wrote that huge seller, The Overstory, Richard Powers.
Oh, yeah.
And
I don't know if he has any nonfiction, but we usually have his books used. So
okay. The nature category that we stock that's stocked at the Bookery is really exciting. There's really just like a lot of great nature writing and walking writing and
definitely. Robin Wall Kimmerer's book has probably been the best-selling new book.
Braiding
Sweetgrass of the last few years that we've carried. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think people are really delighted to come in. This is starting to sound like an ad for the bookery, but but people come through Placerville. You know, as I describe Placerville to somebody, a Hudson Valley resident, a New Yorker, David, who was here, and who said, you know, this could be a Catskill town. This looks like a town in the Catskills. There's towns in the Hudson Valley like this. You know, and then I say, well, we're really kind of known, if you talk to people in the Bay Area or on the coast, they know Placerville as, oh, well, we go to Lake Tahoe, and we always stop there for lunch, and then the kids get candy, and we go to the bookstore. You know, so there's this we're on a kind of a thoroughfare to the big, exciting destinations, right? But so for you to stock these books that are so intelligent and well thought, constructed, new thinking about nature and the environment, you know, it's really, I think it really hits a sweet spot for the audience as well. So yeah. Thanks for coming on the show. As
thanks
usual,
for having me
Darren
again.
Coelho Spring. Yeah. We should have broken this up a little bit. This is a chatty show today, and I hope you're enjoying. But you know, a lot of times we move back and forth to music, and there's interstitial music. Our theme music, by the way, is by Grayson Howard. So delightful. Some of this interstitial music is from New Dog Records, my own label, begun in San Francisco in 1996, with artists like Miguel Noya and Dogon and Robert Uriendal, and that's some of the music that we're hearing when we go into transition. But see, there it is. Yeah, Doug Neal, just doing it. Yeah, there's Robert Uriendal from Estonia, who was introduced to me by David Rothenberg. And so I'm sorry, this is just the David Rothenberg show because it is also the Aidan McGuire show. And Aidan McGuire, our own local outdoor enthusiast, expert climber. He's minted some first climbs here in a region that he enlightened me to the fact is actually one of the most important climbing destinations in the United States. Is that true? Tell us a little bit about why this area is important.
Yeah, I mean, I came here in '92 basically to be a climbing bum because, I mean, there is so much rock to climb in this county, or within maybe an hour and 15 minutes. There's probably 2,000 climbing routes. And then once you get beyond that, you've only 3.5 hours to Yosemite and all the stuff at Lake Tahoe. And so it's an incredibly impressive rock climbing area that a lot of people actually don't realize.
But the climbing community knows it, I hope.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's why we're all here.
Yeah. Like even, you know, I know you hate this anecdote, but even rock star climbers like Alex Honnold, you know, came here and they even tapped you to be their guide at one point, I think.
Well, not his guide, but I took him climbing a couple of times.
You did?
But, well, he grew up in this area.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, he grew up in Sacramento, so this was where he cut his teeth.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so
all right.
Those of us that are old took him out when he was younger.
Oh. Royal Robbins?
He's really old, and but he climbed the loads over here. Yep, he's done lots of routes here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you were out yesterday.
I was out yesterday.
How'd it go?
I wasn't feeling that great, but you know, as I pointed out, even if you're not feeling that great and you're out on pristine rock, hanging out with a friend on a beautiful day, how bad can it be? So it was great.
Well, that's what happened. I took Rothenberg and we went snowshoeing at Lover's Leap on. Well, I'd like to say it was your recommendation, but Amir and I have been doing that route for years, actually.
Yeah.
But
did you go up onto Lover's Leap?
No. We just, as you said, we just hiked up into the snow and hung out with friend talking.
Yeah.
That's what we did.
And I was going to talk a bit about that today, actually.
What do you got for us today? I think we've got a good smattering of different types of outdoor activities today. Is that true?
That's true.
Okay.
Last time I was here, I was like waffling on philosophical about adventure and epics and adventure and risk and so forth. And you said to me, well, that's great, but you need to bring us a story next time. So we're going to start off with a story.
Good.
Right. So most of you probably know Yosemite National Park. And most people think of Yosemite National Park as being the valley. But Yosemite National Park is more than that, and a big part of it for climbers is not just the valley, but it's Tuolumne Meadows, if you've ever been up there. And Tuolumne Meadows takes 120 and it goes right over the top of the Sierras. The whole road is like 10,000 feet and down to 395. And within Tuolumne Meadows, as opposed to being like a valley, it's these big, huge granite domes that are often steep on several sides, and there's a lot of climbing up there. So it's a whole climbing place, especially in the summer. And so this climb took place about 15 years ago on one of the biggest domes there called Fairview Dome. And Fairview Dome is probably 3/4 of a mile long and 1/2 a mile wide and 2,000 feet tall. And it's just this big, huge dome. And we did a route called Lucky Streaks, which is a very well-known route that's quite challenging. I have a picture here, and I think that Doug's going to put up. Okay, so the viewers at home can see that picture right there, and I have one here also, for those of you who are closer. But if you look here, Paul, you can see that dotted white line.
Yeah, I see it. I'm going to stay
Yeah.
away from it.
So that dotted white line is where the route goes. It's about 650 feet, which I figured out is the same height as the Space Needle. So it's big. That's a big piece of rock. And the route, that's good. I think you can probably take that down. Well, actually, yeah, I guess that's good. I will say one thing about this. Could you put it back up a second? Thanks. If you look at the route, as it goes up, it sort of veers to the left quite a bit. And then it goes straight up. That's all we need on that. Anyway, I did this route with a friend of mine called Spencer. And we set up on the route. It's rated 10D, which is pretty difficult, but we were climbing really well, so it was well within our grade. And we expected it to take, I don't know, 5-6 hours or something. And we got up about 300 feet, and it started raining. And so you have to make a decision at that point as to carry on or go down. And he wanted to go down, and I'm always kind of a weather optimist. And I said...
This is because he's from Morecambe in England.
Right. And I said, it's just a shower. It'll be fine. It'll be okay. And sure enough, it was just a shower, and it kind of stopped. And so we continued at the climb to a point where the climbing is kind of going left as you're going higher. So coming back down would be very difficult. And we went all the way underneath this undercling for about 200 feet, and we got to the point where it was the last 200 feet of climbing, which is just straight up this crack in this corner. And we started climbing up there, and it was my turn to lead, and it started raining, really raining. So now we're on this rock face, and we're 400 feet up, and we're 250 feet from the top, and you can't go straight down because the route doesn't go straight down. It's just sheer rock for 400 feet. And you can't really work your way back down because it's going backwards and sideways at the same time. So really the only safe thing to do is to try to go up. But of course the rock gets really wet and really slippy. And it was a crack in the back of this rock that's maybe about this big. And we're doing what's called traditional climbing. So we're not using any bolts.
Oh, you brought some props. Thank God.
So we're not using any bolts. We're using gear like this. And so as you're climbing up, what you're doing is placing a piece of gear like this in, and you squeeze it and put it in the crack and release it, and it holds in there. Or we use nuts like these kind of guys, where you are, things like this that you'll put into small parts of the crack where they catch. And then I clip my rope through that, and I continue above it. So the idea being that if I fall down as far as I am above this piece of protection, and then equal distance below, plus some slack, and then this catches you. That's the whole idea. And when you climb up, say, about 100, 150 feet, you build an anchor and you bring your partner up. And they clean all the gear out, and then you trade over, and they go up, putting the gear in. So none of this gets left behind unless you have to bail and escape off the route, and then you leave hundreds of dollars of gear behind. So everything had been going fine, and we got all the way up to this last 250 feet, and the heavens just opened. And it started just pouring it down. And everything got wet and more serious. But the big problem was that what we didn't realize, maybe it rains and that's not good, but you can probably work with that. But what we didn't realize that this whole massive of rock, which is just rock, there's no dirt up there or trees, all of that water drains off, but it doesn't all drain off equally. It channels down certain areas, and what we came to find out is that Lucky Streaks is where most of that entire formation drains down. So what happened as we started climbing up is this water started developing into like a complete waterfall and we were in the waterfall. And as we went on, the waterfall started getting to the point where I couldn't see the crack. And the waterfall actually grew to a point where it was probably 4 or 5 feet across and maybe 1.5 feet deep. And it was just like a torrential, fast-moving, almost vertical stream. And we had to climb up through this. And so I was lead climbing, and it's only a 5/8 climb, but it all of a sudden became like a 5/11 climb. It became really, really hard.
Can you tell us, we have a lay audience here. Just tell us how the
sorry.
numbers work and the letters. Yeah,
so there's a rating system in climbing called the Yosemite Decimal System we use in this country. And everything that is a technical climb is 5 something, and then point, and then number. And the number after it denotes how hard it is. And everything that's 5 something would require roping up, because if you fell, you'd die. But 5, I could tie you in. You've never been rock climbing. I could tie you in and I could get you up a 5/6, no problem. But by the time you get up to 5/9, 5/10, 5/11, it gets a lot harder. Each step is a significant progression up. And this was 5/8, which is probably harder than you could climb as a non-climber. But in a torrential waterfall, it became like 5/11 or something, because what I would do is I'd push my hand into the crack, and my hand would disappear up to here. And I couldn't see anything, and I could just sort of feel the crack and feel my hand in there and try to figure out some way of gripping onto it. And then I'd put my other hand in, and both hands would disappear, and I'd put my leg into it, and my leg would disappear up to my knee. And I was just completely in this torrential downpour, in this torrential waterfall. And I'd go up a ways, like, trying to hold on and it get washed out. And then I'd have to pull a piece of gear off. And then I'd have to put the gear in, and the gear would disappear. And I'd just be like, oh, I think that feels like it's in there somewhere. But I really didn't have any idea.
So we got to ask. I mean, you're a very experienced climber. Are you basically thinking, I'm going to die?
No.
You never at any point think. I mean, the fear factor. How does fear operate for you?
I was somewhat scared and miserable. I was just like, oh God, this is terrible. I was freezing cold. It was scary. But I just felt like,
you have 3 appendages into the rock, and you're trying to put some equipment in there, and you're not really sure what's nesting. I mean, come on, that's not just like I've done this before and I have to slog my way through it. Oh boy, I'm getting wet.
Well, but so my partner's got a decent anchor built below us at what point, because whenever you go up a pitch length, you build a really good anchor, what we call a bomb-proof anchor, an anchor with maybe 3 or 4 pieces of gear in there, and then you tie into that so that you've got a really solid place that no matter what happens, you've got this anchor. So I'm up 50, 70, 80 feet above my partner, and I'm really sketching about the gear, and I'm sketching about falling off. And I'm scared half to death that I might fall and pitch off 40 feet, 60 feet, 80 feet, and plummet down this cliff. But
Has that ever happened to you?
Not that far.
I mean, will you bounce? Feet. I mean, what I picture is a cartoon.
No.
You're going to kind of bounce when you go 40 feet.
I've never hit a ledge. I've never hit the ground. Yeah. So
if you bounced, you'd lose some stuff like skin, bone?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But this was steep. This thing's like 85 feet, so I probably would have I would have probably fallen straight down. So my fear was I may fall and plummet and fall 60 feet, 80 feet, but I'm not going to go to the ground because at least there's this anchor down here. I might crash into my partner.
Sure.
We might be all slightly injured, but I didn't ever feel like I was going to die.
Okay, got it.
So then we're continuing up, and it was interesting because the rain would start to slacken and the stream would start to go down, and then the stream would come back up again. And we realized that there was so much water on top that the water was running across the rock and coming down, making this waterfall faster than the clouds were moving. So you would see the waterfall, all of a sudden it would go from being this and this, all of a sudden just coming up into a full raging waterfall again. And you'd be like, oh, it's going to stop. And then 5 minutes later, we'd be downpouring again. So, and this thing wasn't like 5 minutes. This was like an hour and a half of stuck in this waterfall climbing. At one point, I got all the way up to within 50 feet of the top, and I managed to get just out of the waterfall and build an anchor, a really good anchor. And I started to bring my partner up, and that's probably where the strongest memory is for me, because I remember looking down at my partner, who was like 70 feet below me. And and as I was looking down at him, he had his hands completely, disappeared into this waterfall, and his feet. And he would have his head like this, and he would pull his head back, put his head back underneath the waterfall again as he's trying to sort of climb by braille and working his way up. And every time he would do that, he would have to lift his head out, take a breath, and go back in again. And eventually he worked all the way up to me. Since I was sort of the more experienced, I climbed the last pitch. We made it up onto the top. I put a piece of gear in, not very much, and I was just so done. Pulled him up over the top, and just like his face, he was just like stepped out of the shower, hairs plastered everywhere, gears hanging everywhere. He had these like big sort of hollow-looking eyes, And I thought, oh my God, that's probably how I look. And he flopped over on the top, and within 5 minutes, it was all over. And the rain stopped, as is like the high Sierras, and the sun started to break out. And from there, you can't hike down very easily. It's a technical descent. So it took us another 45 minutes to get down, 30 minutes back to the pack, 30 minutes back to the car. And we went to the general store and got cocoa and French fries and sat in the car. And we didn't even say anything to each other for like an hour. And I think the first thing he said was, I told you about the weather, dude. I told you. And I never heard the end of it. So, yeah.
Very good. Well, I asked for a story. I got a whale of a story.
Whale, yeah.
Dare we say?
Do we have a little more time?
Aiden, of course we do.
Okay,
and
great.
Of course, now that we've got your story, you're going to give us a climbing adventure for the lay audience, right? You're going to tell us where we can go to rock climb with no experience.
Yeah.
No. What do you?
No.
Tell us something we can do. Come on.
Well, yeah. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about outdoor snow play. Because
Okay.
it is the season, right?
we
snow
got
season.
some good weather. We got some snow. Yeah.
So, I'm a big believer that you should get outside. You should do something. You should get off your phone and get away from your TV. And it's never as bad as you think it is. Just put a coat and go outside. And we have lots of places to play in the snow, as you've just been experiencing the other day. One of them is snowshoeing, right? Which you can certainly speak to.
Well, just that eventually, we used to love cross-country skiing, and I don't know what happened, but just the equipment, the slippy, slidey, when really it suddenly dawned on me, all I really wanted to do was to be out in nature on a sunny day, hopefully, with snow and the crisp air, and then I heard about snowshoes, and I'm like, snowshoes? Boy, online sales, maybe I could get a pair of snowshoes. And of course, technology being what it was, they've gotten lighter and cheaper and better, and so I just ordered some snowshoes, and now who needs all that nonsense with the slipping and sliding? They're just grippy, and you can go hiking in the woods, and that's it.
You can probably walk up a 45-degree angle with some snowshoes. They grip really well. They have these teeth in the gauge.
Yeah. Sorry, somebody caught a call here. And so, good. So tell the folks here at home where they can go. Tell them where to go.
You can snowshoe anywhere where you've got snow. That's easy. That's a great thing about it. It's essentially just walking. Great places to go is up in Crystal Basin, up by Ice House Lake, Union Valley Lake, Loon Lake, are all beautiful.
Gurley.
Up by where you were at by Lover's Leap.
Bassy Falls.
There's so many places. In terms of like getting snowshoes, you can pick them up cheap. You can also rent them from Squirrel up at the Strawberry General Store. You can rent them from REI. So that's a really good one. The other one is sledding. Sledding's always really fun. Picking up sleds, you can sled up at, there's some great spots up at Ice House Road that are not just like, because everybody wants to go to the same place. But you go up Ice House Road, just out of the canyon up there's some great sledding spots that you can just sort of make your own runs, which is really fun. Loon Lake's got great sledding. You can pick up a sled for cheap at the Placerville hardware store. So all of that, I think, is great. The other thing I just want to put a plug in, so that's kind of snow play, right? We didn't even get into cross-country skiing, but like you say, it's a little bit more technical, but it's beautiful. Cronin Ranch this time of year is fabulous. Cronin Ranch is a big area bought by the American River Conservancy of, I think, 14,000 acres down in Coloma. this, for like the next couple of months, is the most beautiful area with just lush new grasses coming in, fields of poppies and wildflowers, and there's all kinds of wonderful hiking trails that you can walk, run, or ride your mountain bike. In fact, we're going to go out there on Saturday, aren't we?
I hope so.
I
Except
hope so
I'll be
too.
at the David Rothenberg workshop.
So, okay.
So, Aidan, we really appreciate your coming on the show. You're full of great outside ideas and adventures, and I think you should just have your own, website or blog. We got to
Yeah.
get something going so they can return to all this material with all the links. We will put some links into the show notes.
Sure, yeah,
Thank you for your
yeah.
tale
You're
of
welcome.
near disaster,
Epic.
and always pleasure to see you.
Last thing I wanted to leave you with, Alice by Heart.
Yes.
Eldorado, talk about adventure that's not outside. Eldorado High School's play, and they're always brilliant, has their latest one, which is showing tonight, Friday and Saturday, and it's called Alice by Heart, and it's a twisted version of Alice in Wonderland set in the Blitz of World War II in London. And it's great, and it's really like the best inexpensive entertainment. So I had to plug in for those guys.
Thank you. I'm going to go Saturday. And of course, Paul Tomei, Studio 81,
Yeah.
doing amazing work. This is a musical by Duncan Sheik and Stephen Sater. And in fact, on the Rothenberg front, it's been a few minutes since I said that name. David actually did work with Duncan Sheik for Suzanne Vega.
Oh.
If I got that right, but he'll correct us. Thanks, Aidan McGuire.
Thank you very much.
And we're going to our card because we will be having a musical interlude from David Rothenberg. He's going to give us some pond sounds, I hope.
Yes, that whole last segment made me think about Ornette Coleman and playing inside a waterfall. And, of course, the promised underwater pond sounds that are very mysterious things. So all that's going to be there.
Thank you.
In a hollow in the wood, a little man in a speckled hood
Secret Songs of Ponds, David Rothenberg. Yeah. In Secret Sounds of Ponds, David Rothenberg tosses a microphone into a pond, and we read about an entirely new world, a realm of the unexpected and stirring rhythms and tones of some of the smallest and loudest creatures on Earth. Every chapter contains multiple full-color photographs and musical works presented both as spectrograms and as QR codes that you can listen to with your phone. And that's available at Roof Books, bookshop.org, Barnes & Noble, and also, of course, from David's own terranovapress.com.
It's not available from terranovapress.com.
How strange.
Because it's not published by me. It's published by Roof Books.
Roof Books. Roof. And so a couple of things in this little description are exciting to me. Well, one is I think that you among others, began to define the representing of music. You know, music, CDs with books, other alternatives. Talk about that a little bit. I know CDs are a thing of the past in this country, but...
Yeah, I've always tried to figure out how you could put sound into books. And probably it was like 1999 was the first time I did a book with a CD in it. That was the Book of Music and Nature, an anthology. And then you could put the music and books together, you know, and then this would be unusual, but people knew where you could have the music and the book part. But now everything has changed because sound is just there. Music is just virtually endlessly available, always. No one wants to pay for it. And even when you do pay for it, it's almost free. And interesting that people still don't want to pay for it when it's so cheap. They'd rather get everything for free. And, you know, books, it's interesting. So far, I've staved that off. But those who know, you could download any book for free at any time and read stuff endlessly. But because reading is more work, we tend not to steal as many digital books because it's more work than music. But now, this is the first time I've done a book that has a lot of QR codes in it. So you can hold up your phone and sound just plays. Or if you want to get all the music some other digital way, it's available in all digital forms. I asked around online, does anybody want a CD version? And enough people wrote back, so I said, okay, I'll make it. And then I could put these cool pictures and images of water bugs that make these sounds. And
so what does it mean here? It says the smallest and loudest creatures.
Yeah, one of the featured musicians on this project, the lesser water boatman, is a bug like this big. Here he is, right there.
Why is he so loud?
Well, you know, because it was about 15 years ago, scientists were like deciding fresh water might be worth listening to as much as salt water, where we had whales and shrimp sounds. And they stuck a hydrophone in a pond, and it was so loud that they were sure the equipment had suddenly gotten broken because there's no sound above. Like, what's wrong? What's happened? And it turned out this bug was making a sound up to 90 decibels in volume by vibrating its penis against its body. This is the lesser water boatman. When the greater water boatman found out, he was really pissed off about this. But anyway, this is like one of these weird science stories that gets reported, you know, endlessly on the media. So
Trying to connect this to the male use of the electric guitar.
It's
and
the same thing.
track the
It's
other
such a great
opposite
story.
species. Yeah.
And then the other thing is, I said this must be some rare thing, but you hear them everywhere. And the same thing happened to me last year when I was recording. I wasn't vibrating my penis underwater, but just trying to record. And in one pond, there was totally silent. I go to another pond, it's so loud that I said, oh, it must have busted the equipment. And of course, it was the time of year, which is around now, when these bugs really start to sing. And I don't know if it counts as singing, you know. Like, is it singing? No, because it's not a vocal experience. It's more like crickets, what they're doing with their legs usually, or cicadas vibrating their abdomen. Music is made, like, you know, life forms, animals are desperate to make music. And why do I call it music? Because they communicate, whatever the purpose is of this. They're making these cool sounds by just repeating them over and over and over again. They need to do it. It's not like they're saying a message, like a call, like the sound of, you know, a crow that says like caw. That's a call. It's not a song. They're saying specific things. Crows and ravens know hundreds of sounds, and they have a whole language-like thing. But music, we as humans love hearing the same songs over and over and over again. And the same with these animals with a musical side. They need to repeat the same sounds over and over again.
Now, okay, good. And do they care about the sounds we make? Does the natural world pay attention to our sounds?
Well, scientists recently decided there's no such thing as the Anthropocene. That's just more human hubris. We think we get our own era, we're so great. No, it doesn't matter. We can destroy ourselves. Nature goes on. We're just one little species with our weird stuff that we do. Do they care? Does anyone care? The world is full of beings that are immersed in sound. And you might say, what does a water bug care? What kind of sound I'm making? But, last month it was cold where I punched a hole in the ice, stuck down a hydrophone. There was twice I went out with different journalists and we said, it's winter, we're not going to hear anything. And we didn't hear anything, but then when I played a sound above the water that sounded like one of these bugs, every time we heard one respond. Every time. And we weren't even using a speaker. They could just feel the pattern vibrations through the ground. Over and over and again, they just responded. I never thought water bugs would care what I was doing, but I was wrong.
Yeah, so
I never thought I'd be invited on Paul Godwin's Placerville podcast, but I was wrong.
You were wrong. You're invited back. You're invited back anytime. When we started playing with the hydrophone, I spoke to my partner, Miguel Noya, in Venezuela, and he said, okay, well, I'm going to record some sounds of the frogs in our pond in rural Venezuela. And then can we get some underwater speakers hooked up in Placerville at Wakamatsu Pond? And I want you to play the frogs from Venezuela into Placerville. And then can we record in the pond at Wakamatsu? And we're going to hear we hoped, the frogs responding to the other frogs from the other side of the world. Expound. Do you think it would work?
Yeah.
I tried it.
Well,
So far, it didn't work.
Nature takes time. You got to do it every day for like a month. Go spend a whole day, listen for hours, and wait. And that's the kind of patience people often don't have. But when you do, I don't go out and do this all the time. But whenever I do, some strange things happen that aren't expected, that are often very sonically interesting.
Yeah, so this is good. This is a nice segue to talk a little bit more about Ripe Area, and that Miguel will be here in May, and we'll be doing a nature journaling through field recording at Wakamatsu Pond. And so I guess I would ask you finally, last question for David, would be field recording. Flavor of the moment, or what? Like, I understand it's a huge international trend at the moment. What's up?
I think it started in the pandemic when musicians didn't have anywhere they were allowed to play. So people just started walking outside and listening, and they took all their equipment they had for recording music. Let's just listen to what's here. And everyone was already noticing that what was here was changing because there was less human activity. So all kinds of animals wandered around, like in my yard in a similar town to this in the Hudson Valley. There were baby skunks wandering around. I never saw that before. A huge rabbit just came right in front of me, would just eat the things in the vegetable garden and look up at me. Like huge rabbit from who knows where. And birds were singing all the time. And it was changing because there was less human activity.
Great.
So that was the beginning. A lot of people noticed this. I'm going to start documenting it. And they started taking out their phones, their recorders, their microphones. And they realized that depending on what equipment you used, you would hear lots of different things. And it became a thing that got more popular. And I think it remains something a lot of kinds of musicians are interested in.
Yeah.
And what I encourage people to do is what most field recorders don't do. They're mostly interested in, we must preserve nature as it is in its purest state and not mess with it and not have people around, not have human sounds, be deep into nature. I say, number one, there is no such place. We're all around. Humans are everywhere. You're a field recordist. You're there with your equipment. You're a person right there. So don't pretend you're not there. Play along, join in, listen, and recognize the world is full of natural sounds and human sounds. And the only way we're going to survive on this planet, along with all these other creatures and plant sounds and wind and water, is to figure out a way our sounds can go with these sounds. So I encourage people to interact live outdoors, make music with, witness, journal, and connect it all together.
Fantastic. David Rothenberg, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. And for those of you that are local viewing right now on YouTube, David will be here this evening in concert. It's only $5 here at the Green Room Social Club, 251 Main Street, Placerville. He will be joined by yours truly, Paul Godwin, on a little bit of keyboards, and our new best friend, Annette Dunklin, from Grass Valley, Nevada City, on cello. So we're really looking forward to that. 7 o'clock tonight at the Green Room, and then, of course, his workshop. If any of you want to try this out with your phones and just go out in the field with David at Wakamatsu Farm Saturday morning at 11 o'clock, that's a free workshop. By registration, tell us where they can register. Who's this? Hi.
They can register at the American River Conservancy event page with the simple URL bit.ly/ripe area, all in caps, ripe area, all in caps.
Awesome. Amira Godwin from Myrtle Tree Arts, thanks for joining us. Thanks for subbing for the extraordinary and not available today, Rena Wakefield, our associate producer. Tell us all about Ripe Area. What do we need to know?
Well, there's so many things that inspired me from what David and you talked about, that not only does nature need patience, but the artistic journey needs patience. And so we have been working over the last 6 months plus on an event that's coming up. And today we're launching the start of a series of artist-led workshops in and around Placerville. And with this event and David's workshop Saturday at Wakamatsu, and we'll be following the next 3 months with an artist cohort, bringing poetry, writing, storytelling, native plants, native foods, working with seeds and working with berries, and appreciating nature in a way that is very human-centered and yet not human ego-centered. It's human being inspired by nature, just as David described to us. And this will culminate on June 2nd, a Sunday, that will bring a festival of art and music and hands-on experience with nature, all for the watershed, water conservation, and our partnership with American River Conservancy, supported by a grant, a very generous grant from the California Arts Council, the Office of Arts and Culture, and City of Sacramento.
Wow, that is a mouthful. So we'll have links, of course, in the show notes here and at myrtletreearts.com/ripe-area. And I want to thank all our guests today. I want to tell you about our next program. On April 25th, our feature interview will be with Los Angeles-based author, award-winning environmental journalist, and winner of the 2019 Penn E.O. Wilson Literary Science Writing Award, Ben Goldfarb, who's going to be joining us. He is the author of Eager, The Surprising Secret Life of Beavers and Why They Matter, and his latest, Crossings, How Road Ecology is Shaping the Future of Our Planet. Ben will be complimented by our musical artist, technical director of Placertopia, live on his musical hat-wearing Doug Neal of Red Dirt Ruckus. We will also have table nectars Andy Tannehill and Kim Medici. Justin Boyd is going to join us. Justin, of course, of Marcos fame, will be telling us about the upcoming Golden Road Festival #2. It's really going to be an exciting show, April 25th. So, what can I say? Our table dressing here is from Planted on Main, the location you need to go when you want to know and get amazing plants, flowers this spring, something for a loved one's birthday. Flowers on Main, Planted on Main. We are, of course, supported by a generous grant from the Placerville Cannabis Community Grant. Placertopia Live is a production of Myrtle Tree Arts with generous sponsorship From the Green Room Social Club, our technical director is Doug Neal. For Placertopia Live, I am your host, Paul Godwin. Thanks for joining us.